The best decade in metal depends on what you're using as a gauge.
Best. Oh, this is very tough, but best means to me also is what important.
Because the 70s was really good. That's when it started, right? I mean, you had Black Sabbath doing it in 69.
70s.
The 70s are still my favorite.
Yeah.
69 to 74.
Yeah.
I don't think I should be here.
It's 1969 in Hamburg, Germany. It's probably the greatest time.
And Led Zeppelin in 69, and then it gives way to Judas Priest, who actually kind of coined or not coined, but accepted the term heavy metal. And then everything that came out of it, like, shit, Motorhead, all the classic metal bands came from the 70s, even like Iron Maiden there at the tail end of the 70s.
80s.
Agreed.
I mean, that's
Fair.
Shit, it wasn't even called metal until then.
Fair metal.
Then you got the whole thing.
Yeah, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, Slayer's debut album.
Yeah, you got all this different stuff. You got funny metal, you got hard metal, you got like the start of every fucking, it's like...
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a tall order. The best decade of metal.
I'm gonna go with the 90s for that.
I would think the best decade of metal has to be early mid 90s, when it's just man, it's tough because Maiden is like 80.
Well, I would say this decade is the best for metal because my band is finally going to release a metal song. So I'm pretty stoked about that. We have a metal song on the record coming out in November featuring Gojira, which is awesome.
For me in my life, probably 2000 to 2010, just because of like Slipknot, fucking like Iowa. I mean, that record changed everything. Like fucking Korn and a lot of the kind of like stuff that I first started listening to that like I've never heard anything like this. Yeah, I mean, there's just like some killer fucking records that came out in that decade.
To me, metal has always been about Iron Maiden, Megadeth, Metallica, Judas Priest. Like, I know that they've kind of spanned over such a long period of time, but I think, you have records like Countdown to Extinction right around the same time as, I think, the Black Album, and it's such a massive shift and massive movement for metal to have broken into the mainstream. And I know a lot of people were kind of aggressive towards Metallica for doing something like that, but look what it did for metal. I mean, now they've reached such a wider range of people that now like it because of those moves that those bands made. And I think because of that, it really helped bands like my band and other bands out on this festival have a career where they can reach that kind of people because of bands like that paving that way for us.
I grew up huge into Metallica because of my dad, but a lot of the first metal that I got into was that Roadrunner era towards the end of the 90s. That kind of blended with hardcore too, because you had like Life of Agony and Biohazard blending with like your Slipknots and your Korns and your like Sepulturas. That era of like 90 to like 95 on is when I really, really started like fucking with it.
The 80s are so wild, it's like, depending on what your music tastes were, you had this like seminal decade for completely different musics.
You could get into the weeds on post-punk,
and
hardcore punk.
And the way music worked back then, you never would have fucking met each other.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about
you
that.
You could be like a fucking punk dude, and like you'd have all these seminal albums. You'd be a metal, you'd have all these seminal albums. You could be a fucking post-punk weirdo, a collegiate man. You could have all these seminal albums. There's so much, or you'd be like some new romantic fucker, some goth son of a bitch. There's so many people with this fucking no one of the 80s.
But now you
so
have
for revival.
all of it is in the primordial soup of the internet.
Yeah.
It's all mixing. So that's like the character in Slaughterhouse-Five. Like Billy Pilgrim has come unstuck in time. All music genres have become unstuck in time. And for kids,
or a lot of that shit melded already, and the kids like
they pick and choose.
You get the shit beat out of you for liking a different band back then. People don't even know. I don't even know. That's like way before my time.
We were talking about that for now. It's like Korn's about to go on. Like young kids who are like SoundCloud rap kids love Korn.
So the 70s is crucial, but then from another perspective, the 80s was special because, like, for example, I was reading Rudy Sarzo's book. Like, I might be off on the specific number, but I don't think I am. In the 80s, metal was so popular that Rudy Sarzo played on 5 platinum albums in a fucking row. Rudy Sarzo, who's just a session live guy, played on 5 platinum albums in a fucking row. The point being, even a dude like Rudy Sarzo, who's fucking awesome, but the 80s metal was so fucking popular that Rudy Sarzo played on 5 platinum albums in a row. So that's kind of when, to me, metal was peaking.
was its biggest in the 80s for sure.
Biggest in the 80s, the most important bands were in the 70s, so 70s, 80s, it's a toss-up.
The 80s, man, because of the development of the genre of heavy metal. Certain bands assuming certain styles and growing with those styles. Venom, Merciful Fate, Judas Priest still doing their thing and doing it big in the 80s. Oh God, I could go on forever, but that developmental thing in the 80s. Metallica, oh, Slayer. Oh my God, Slayer in the 80s. The 80s, to me, the most important, hands down. That doesn't mean best. So, I don't know, man, but I'm going with the 80s.
I mean, it's all great. Like, there's, I love fucking 80s metal and 90s, I love it all. But I guess for me in my life, 2000, 2010 was like the pivotal kind of time period of metal records, like get me going,
So there's also the compression of history. It's like the Bronze Age or whatever bullshit. It's like a lot of time. So at some point, all these different genres, it's like, oh, you're just a rock band. Put them on the same fucking vessel.